Welcome to the New Mom Talk podcast, your go-to podcast for evidence-based answers to your burning questions about parenting. Join us as we dive into commonly Googled topics and hear from experts and real moms. Let's navigate parenthood together, one question at a time. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to talk about blending ancestral remedies with modern science to support moms throughout every stage in life. So I'm excited for this because I think when you are expecting, you're jumping around from various stages, right? You go from being pregnant to postpartum, and if you're nursing, so there's a lot. That said, we have Luna Aziz. I'm going to hand it over to you if you can start telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Yes. It's a pleasure chatting with you today. And I think you really nailed it on the head with just so many chapters of woman's life that we go through. I remember when I was trying to find out what was going on with my own hormonal issues. It's been like a decade-long struggle to try to understand what was happening and going to various doctors and having to be my own advocate and do my own research. And I remember one doctor who finally said, "I think you have PCOS." And I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of assumed that, but I had never actually gotten a diagnosis." And he said, when I look at the trajectory of a woman's hormones and how much they fluctuate from, you think about like puberty and then when you are trying to conceive and then pregnancy and then postpartum, and then you go into perimenopause and then menopause. We're on a roller coaster for several years, decades. Whereas he said men are pretty much, stagnant that entire time. So it's no wonder that, I still think there's such a dearth of research that's being done on women, for one, and specialized research that we're looking just at the female population instead of just what's happening with both female and male, because I think there's a lot of differences. But where I kind of started with this was not understanding why I was not able to make enough milk for my first baby. I was exclusive pumping. I was also triple feeding, which I would not wish on my worst enemy. My son was a late term preemie. And so in the hospital, they immediately gave me a hospital grade pump to use because I wasn't able to produce enough colostrum for him in the first few days. And they gave me this triple feeding schedule, which was essentially you nurse baby 8 to 12 times in a 24-hour period. Then you pump directly after and you supplement that milk or formula if you don't make enough pumped milk to baby. And you do that 24 hours in a day, all day long. It pretty much becomes your full-time job. So I didn't realize that that was a very short-term fix. That is not something you want to do long-term because it's very physically and emotionally draining and taxing on you. Unfortunately, I didn't get that memo. So I did that for 9 weeks straight, went immediately into a very deep postpartum depression. I think that was a huge part of it because I still wanted to understand why I wasn't able to make enough milk, because I truly felt like I was moving heaven and earth. I was doing all the things. I learned about how to maximize my pumping sessions, learning my pump settings, using my hands, figuring out my flange size. I worked with lactation consultants. I was taking an herbal galactagogue that had been around for 20 years. And it really came down to trying to understand the why and starting to do the research, because I didn't think at that time, that was 10 years ago, there really wasn't a lot of research about chronic low milk supply. It was also, there were a lot of myths around it that, only 1% to 2% of women will experience this, that most women will have a very full, abundant supply, that our bodies are trained to do what they're supposed to do, that you just need to pump more, you just need to drink more water, eat more oats. And I was doing all those things and felt like I was just going into this terribly vicious cycle of grief and shame around my body feeling like it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. So I found out that I had PCOS, that I was also insulin resistant. Doing more research and looking at some of the lactation experts who had written books about this, one being Hillary Jacobson, Lisa Marasco. They started culminating their own research about chronic low milk supply. And now, 10 years later, I'm just so proud that we finally have discussions around these things, and we're not shaming moms for feeling like they're not doing enough, because it's truly their underlying issues. There's a root cause to why it's happening. It's not because you're not good enough or you're not doing enough. And from that, Legendairy Milk was born. So I'm from the Middle East, and we have a lot of various galactagogues, foods that we use, culinary foods, fennel, dill that we put, seasonings that we put in our food, dates, all these things that my family was like kind of plying me with. And I can't eat dates anymore because that's pretty much what I ate every day for like 3 months. But, I just started doing research on what women in different cultures have been, using for centuries to help increase their milk supply, that maybe there isn't a ton of research on, but the ancestral wisdom is there. And I became my own guinea pig. So I started ordering these herbs online. I bought a coffee grinder. I grinded them up myself. put them in a little pill encapsulator that I had found on eBay. And I created my own formulations based on that. And whatever worked for me, I created into a product, not expecting honestly that it was going to be something that I would sell. It was just something I was using. But I was 4 months postpartum at that point, and I thought, well, maybe there are other moms who, cannot use fenugreek for whatever reason, because that was kind of the only thing on the market for a very long time. So I posted the products on Etsy, thinking, I'll get one order a month. It'll just be like a fun side hobby. And 10 years later, it's just very surreal to think that this is a full-fledged business, because it really came from my own personal need and my own personal mission to understand why I was not able to make enough milk and how to solve that problem.
First of all, the fact that you were even able to do that at 4 months postpartum is impressive, because I feel like it's hard
Thank
to
you.
even just brush your teeth.
Truly. I can't say that it was probably a healthy thing physically and mentally for me, because I was stretched very thin that first year. I remember I would be with baby all day long. And then at 7 p.m., my husband would have the changing of the guards. My husband would take over, help me to put him to bed. And then I would start working from 8 p.m. to 2 or 3 a.m. And that is when I was making the product, using the coffee grinder, grinding up all the herbs, putting them in this pill encapsulator, putting them into bottles, putting the label on them. I was also messaging with moms all night long, because for me, it was very much the products were secondary to the information and education, because I felt like I did not have that support locally, and that I had worked with a lot of lactation consultants who I felt like were at a deficit when it came to understanding chronic low milk supply. So when a mom would come to me and I felt like our journeys were very similar, I didn't want her to feel like this was going to be the magic pill that was going to solve it, because there were so many other things that I was doing. It was multifactorial. Like, it wasn't just the supplements. That's a complement to you doing all these other things and kind of understanding the underlying reason why you might not be making enough milk. So I'd work until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd wake up at 7 a.m. with the babies. I did not sleep that first year, and I definitely do not recommend that. But I think it was such a huge passion for me. And I don't think you really understand until you're in it, how much of your life is going to revolve around breastfeeding and just all the caregiving facets of being a new mom.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so true. Well, I would love to dive into a little bit more about these kind of remedies and how you created your own. So that said, let's start off with the basics. What are ancestral remedies? And then we can go into talking about the generations that have passed them down and whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as I was doing my research, I found that a lot of times it stemmed from animal research that had been done, particularly with dairy cows. And so I think about, centuries ago when dairy farmers were trying to find fodder to help produce more milk for their dairy cows. How were they doing that? A lot of it was trial and error. They might try one thing and it didn't produce enough milk for their cows, and then something else that multiplied it exponentially. So some of the things I found, alfalfa was something that was quite often used. Goat's rue in France was often used for dairy cows. There was also, we talk about, when I say centuries, I remember I found this one herb that had been studied. There was actually, I believe, a Harvard study done on it in the 1950s. It was an ancient remedy in the Mayan civilization, so literally a millennia ago, called ishboot. And it was a tea that women would use to help not only to increase their milk supply, but to induce lactation or relactate. And there were stories about grandmothers who were able to relactate or induce lactation after years and years of not breastfeeding by using this tea. So I was just so fascinated by all of these stories that had been passed down by generations. And the interesting thing about the Mayan civilization is they like to treat like with like, meaning if you were to actually see the ishboot plant and the leaf, if you break it open, there's a milky sap inside of it. And it kind of looks like breast milk. And so oftentimes they would treat whatever medicinal, issue it was, they would treat it with something that looked very similar to whatever the ailment was. So I was able to source the ishboot. We found someone in Central America who was still growing it. It definitely had, I'd say, wasn't as popular as it had been, centuries ago, because with the advent of formula, a lot of moms there were formula feeding instead of breastfeeding. But we brought it. It's now called titas. We have it as a tea that you can drink. It tastes great, very mild flavor to it. It has a calming effect too, which I think a lot of moms, I didn't realize stress could impact your milk supply so much, especially if you are going back to work and you have limited time to pump. The pressures around having meetings, or, if you're on your feet all day and there's just never time to take breaks to pump, that can absolutely impact your milk supply. And we have so many moms who reach out and say, as soon as I got back to work, I just saw this drastic drop in supply. And a lot of times it's stress induced. So drinking that warm cup of tea can really help to kind of let that oxytocin, that love hormone, to flow and get the milk flowing as well.
Would you be able to share a little bit about how women can identify what's the most supportive ancestral remedies based off of their needs, whether they're in going through pregnancy or whether they're in postpartum stage?
The interesting thing about that I found is we all have such unique body chemistries. And what works well for me may not necessarily work well for another mother. And so I really thought about that when I was making the formulations because I thought it was important to understand the different gaps where someone might find that, for example, moringa is something that has gotten more popular over the last few years. It's a superfood. People are putting it in smoothies and shakes. There's actually a lot of research on it in regards to breastfeeding and how it increases the prolactin hormone, which is the major milk making hormone. So there was a clinical study that showed that women who were in late term pregnancy could take moringa. And the women who were in this study who were taking the moringa versus the women who were in the control part of the group who were not taking anything, the moringa group produced exponentially more milk after they had their babies. So that's something that's highly nutritive. It's really a nutritional powerhouse. There's so many vitamins and minerals in moringa. And if you think about a new mom, I was definitely there where you barely have enough time to just shovel food into your mouth as you're, breastfeeding baby and doing your household duties, caregiving, all of the things. You're tired, you're sleep deprived. It was very tough for me to have a warm, nourishing meal. And so I thought maybe there are other moms who feel like there's some nutritional gaps that they could fill with moringa, for example. So that's in our Milkapalooza product. Another product, for example, is Liquid Gold, which is one of our best-selling products. And there's a combination of herbs in there, but I'd say the two heavy hitters are goat's root and milk thistle. Goat's root is actually an insulin sensitizer. And it kind of goes back to my underlying issue, which was PCOS. A lot of people don't realize that our breasts have to be insulin sensitive or receptive to insulin to be able to make milk. And that's some of the newer research that's come out, I'd say, just in the last 5 years. So many times when I'm talking to moms and they're like, all I'm craving is sweets, all I want is carbs, I'm living off of this kind of, sweet treats and carb heavy diet, I'm drinking coffee to just survive. What we're doing to our bodies is we're going through this kind of roller coaster ride of spikes in our blood sugar and then crashes. So, you're grabbing, let's say, pancakes or a donut or something in the morning with some coffee. You're getting that huge surge in blood glucose, but you're getting some energy from it too. And then like 1 or 2 hours later, you're crashing and then you feel terrible again. And so what that's doing is it's making your body work harder to produce insulin. And over time, that actually might make it so that your milk supply decreases, or for subsequent babies, you may find that you become insulin resistant and then you might have chronic low milk supply. So when you have insulin sensitizers like goat's root in one of these formulations, what it's doing is helping to balance your blood sugar so that your breast can then become sensitive and receptive to insulin. And then we find that a lot of moms are able to make more milk because of that. So it's interesting the science behind it as well. But you can see why there isn't like a one size fits all for any mom because it really depends on what the underlying factors are. But I'd say liquid gold is a really popular one for sure.
Hi, everyone. It's your host, Mariella. I want to thank you for listening and share some ways to show your continued support. You can rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share the show with friends and family. Buy me a coffee to help with the financial costs of running a podcast. Follow me on Instagram at newmomtalk.podcast. And finally, subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you for listening. I love all that just because I feel like in our society, we want just like this magic pill, right? This one thing that does everything that you need to do. And as you mentioned, like every mom's need is different. So
Yes.
you definitely need to be a little bit more knowledgeable about like, what is it that my need is and what, I don't know what herbal remedy, or I don't know what to call it, not a vitamin, but what is
Totally.
it that I need? Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the dehydration and the replete of certain electrolytes that the depletion of certain electrolytes, potassium being one. That's something that, coconut water is commonly recommended for breastfeeding moms because it's naturally high in potassium. We're chronically dehydrated, we're chronically thirsty, and we're losing some of those electrolytes in that process. So we came out with a product called She's Thirsty, which is a dehydrated coconut powder. It also has some vitamin C in it. It has a little bit of B12 or a little bit of an energy boost. It has zinc in it as well. And so some women are also deficient in zinc, and that can be another reason it might be impacting milk supply. So we created this formula with mom in mind. You can take it during pregnancy because we also know you can be very dehydrated and thirsty during pregnancy, but also in the postpartum period. So even then, that's not necessarily an herbal remedy, but it's going back to like, what's the underlying root issue? Are you chronically dehydrated? Are you depleted in certain electrolytes? And we find a lot of moms, maybe that's just it. That's all they needed was just a little boost in potassium to get their milk going again.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So if you could share, how does like modern science align with, say, some traditional practices, such as the ones that you have found, or the different, what do I call them? I don't want to call them vitamins because they're not really vitamins, right?
Supplements or
There you go.
herbal remedy, yes, any of those will apply. I think, a decade ago when I started the deep dive into the research, it was mostly animal studies. Again, this is not something where a pharmaceutical company is ever going to invest in goat's root helping with milk supply, right? It's never going to be $1 billion drug to help increase milk supply. And we already know there's such a lack of research when it comes to chronic low milk supply and breastfeeding. And so that's where I started. That's kind of guided my decision making in terms of what targeted blends I wanted to create was the animal studies that had been done, and then also the traditional wisdom that had been shared in a lot of like just folk wisdom, ancestral wisdom that I would find in books, some different research studies that had been done where it was more like focus groups or surveys, just giving an account of what a certain culture found worked well for them. And then actually, I'd say in the last 5 years, where more research come out, which is amazing. Hi. um, in Oh my gosh, she's adorable.
Thank you.
Look at that hair. The last 5 years or so, we're seeing that there's actually more research coming out. So the one I mentioned about moringa, where they actually studied it on late-term pregnant moms and showed what happened after they had the baby and how it was able to increase their milk supply exponentially compared to the group that didn't. There was another study done on premature mothers of premature babies. And so they put one arm of that group on a combination of a basically the isomer, or the, how do I explain isomer? I guess the strongest component of goat's root and milk thistle. They basically isolated the strongest, the most effective part of the herb. And they gave them a combination of goat's root and milk thistle. And then the other group didn't have anything. And they found that the mothers that had premature babies were able to reach a full milk supply with that. And it also showed that it was safe and effective even when you had a premature baby, as I think that's always been a concern too, right? If you have an immune compromised baby, if you're a premature baby, can you still use these herbs? Because herbs are still medicine, right? A lot of the prescription medications that we have on the market came from, from the base of being an herb that they were able to isolate, the isomer of, or whatever fraction of that they could. It's just interesting to see in the last 5 years, there's definitely more research coming out. I would love to see more head-to-head studies, more peer-reviewed, double-blinded studies, and maybe that will come with time. But I also think, we've helped thousands of moms now over the last 10 years around the world. And we're getting feedback all the time, because that is something that's really important to me. Is we can't get better if we don't receive honest feedback about what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And so we're always, our customer service team is always open to that and very receptive to that. And we do change our formulations or our packaging or what have you based on the feedback that we receive. And so it's been pretty amazing to see that these formulations have really changed the game for some of these breastfeeding moms, and been able to help them to create a small milk stash before they go to work, or maybe after they return to work and when they were stressed and they had a drop in milk supply, maybe they were sick or they had mastitis and needed to recover from that. So I feel like we have a product for kind of every need. And that was very intentional on my part, because I wanted to make sure that we really, for every, all walks of life, every woman, what they're going through, we have something in mind for them.
Love all of this that you've been sharing as far as some connections with certain herbs. Would you be able to, I want to take time during this session here to just kind of share certain herbs and what they've shown to do for moms, whether it's like, you mentioned goat's root and whatnot.
Absolutely. So one that comes to mind, I was thinking about this the other day because it's so wildly different than what we do here in the US. It's the 40-day period in China where mom is the confinement time. 40 days is typically standard, where mom, it's really focused on rest and recovery for mom. And what she's typically served is lots of nourishing hot foods, lots of broths, things that are high in vitamins and minerals to help replete maybe some of the vitamins that she lost during the birth, whether there was blood loss during that time as well, any sort of trauma. Her job is to lay in bed with baby, bond with baby, initiate that breastfeeding journey, do a lot of skin to skin, and just recover. And so I think it's interesting that they have a huge focus on hot foods. And in looking into that, I found an herb called, or a plant called torbangan, and that is indigenous to Indonesia. And it has kind of a spicy chili like taste to it. So, very much in the realm of kind of the hot foods that they like to serve during that period of time. And what I found was a lot of anecdotal stories about moms who were served this soup within the first month postpartum. Again, it's extremely nourishing broth. I would liken torbangan to something like a moringa or spinach, highly nutritious, such a superfood. And there was actually done where they compared torbangan to fenugreek. And they found that the women who were served this torbangan soup, it increased their milk supply, I want to say by like 60% compared to the fenugreek group, which I thought was really interesting to have a head-to-head study comparing to another herb that has been around for a very long time. So, you can see this kind of ancestral wisdom tied to an actual study that we're seeing. I think that so many women have trusted their gut over the last millennia of breastfeeding. They understand that traditional ancestral wisdom is so powerful. And what worked for your mother or your grandmother or your great grandmother can also work for you. We've just lost some of that wisdom along the way. And that was really my goal, was to bring it to the West, because I think in different cultures, they're already doing these things. But I think here in the US, we just don't know about them. So hopefully this just gives mom more options. And if she finds that fenugreek works really well for her, that's amazing. But if she wants to try alternatives, she has them available to her as well.
And I really appreciate that you've been sharing that there's a lot of studies. So, really sharing that there's evidence based off of the different herbs that are available for moms. I mean, obviously, we're not going to have a lot of studies done on moms that are expecting or that are nursing because, well, you just don't want anything bad to happen, right?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
So it is a lot of these studies are just based on something that is an herb and not different medicines that maybe moms want because you just want a quick fix. So there's alternatives, lactation consultants that can hopefully provide some of this knowledge if it's overwhelming.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with that, do you have any advice on like where moms can learn a little bit more about the different herbs that are available based off of their needs that can make them feel a little bit more confident and not so overwhelmed? Because I think it is really easy to need, for example, I was struggling with my pump supply and it was like, well, where do I even begin? Like, there's so much
Right.
information, right? Yes, I can do the oatmeal, I can do all this stuff, but what's the
Yes.
easiest route?
Absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of information out there, and sometimes it's contradictory to itself as well. I know a lot of moms are finding that information on social media, and I do too. We're all on there. So we do try to provide a lot of education and support on our Legendary Milk accounts. Want to give a shout out to our team, because we do have lactation consultants on our team who are really striving to provide the gold standard when it comes to education around pump output, how to maximize your pump sessions, how to use your hands while you pump, how to understand your flange size, how to get a good latch. I mean, I think we daily were inundated with questions about latching, because I think in the hospital it feels like it just kind of goes one ear and out the other. You're just so overwhelmed. And it seems like baby gets it in the hospital, and then you're discharged, after a couple of days, and you're like, what was that again? What was I supposed to be doing? And now it hurts, or baby has a shallow latch, or doesn't feel like they're transferring well. And, that's where a lactation consultant in private practice can be a huge help. Some of the books that I would say have really helped in my journey, one being, it's a book called Mother Food, and it's written by Hilary Jacobson. And she is a holistic lactation consultant who really, really is in the support of a lactogenic diet, meaning that you're incorporating certain foods and drinks into your diet as kind of just, it's low level, low lift. It's just part of your daily diet. But a lot of these foods that we may not even know are lactogenic. For example, sweet potatoes. I remember I reading in her book, almonds are the most lactogenic nut. And I'm like, what? I need to start drinking almond milk. There's definitely oats and things like that. But I just thought it was fascinating to see that there's actually quite a plethora of foods that we can be incorporating in our diet that we don't even know that are lactogenic. So she has a whole section there about herbs as well and how to incorporate them, the different tinctures you can make. So I highly recommend her book. Another one for someone who is struggling with low milk supply and wanting to understand the why behind that and what they can be doing proactively, whether it's with this baby or even in the next pregnancy, is a book called Making More Milk. It's the second edition, and it's written by Lisa Marasco, who's also an IBCLC. That was my holy grail in pregnancy, because I was still trying to understand what I could do proactively in my second pregnancy to be able to make a full milk supply with that baby. And I did a lot of things in my third trimester that I did not with my first baby. And I feel like that was a huge game changer for me because I was able to make a full milk supply with him. So highly recommend those two books if someone is wanting to do more reading on that.
I love that, and I really love that you also shared just a variety of practices that are not only, to one specific region, but just throughout the world, from China to Indonesia. I think that's incredible to be able to incorporate in what you are doing and for moms to have access here in the States.
Thank you.
So
It's truly been a labor of love. This is my third baby. I'm super passionate about this. I could talk about it all day long, although most people in my life are not not as interested in this. And it makes for fun party chatter when a man comes up to me who does not have children. I start talking about breastfeeding. I can just see their eyes glaze over. But no, it's something that has been my purpose in life for the last 10 years. And it has been an honor to help so many moms and babies.
well, do you have any other tips, suggestions, or recommendations? Everything that you shared, I think, has been just so incredible and helpful, including I'll have your website linked in the show notes. So anyone that is interested in learning more about your different supplements available and the other items that you have, they can go from there.
For sure. Yeah. I think knowledge is power. Absolutely. If you're feeling like you're in a place where you're not understanding why you've had a sudden drop in milk supply or why you have been trying all the things and have not been able to reach a full milk supply, definitely reach out to us. Our customer service team are all certified breastfeeding specialists. Our social media team is comprised of lactation consultants. So we're always here to help. We have a ton of blog posts and videos related to all the things. I guarantee whatever you're going through, we have dealt with it as well. My entire team, we're primarily comprised of women. Our entire product development team is women. We really wanted to make sure that we were building these products with women in mind. And we have a lot of, I'd say, just open forum conversations about all the things that women go through. So not only do we, focus on lactation, but we've expanded to kind of all facets of a woman's life. So we have products to help with UTIs, vaginal odor or discharge, or just vaginal health in general. We have something for PCOS and hormonal imbalance. We're working on some products for perimenopause, for PMS pain. We really just want to be that one-stop shop for womanhood. And the only way that we do that is to destigmatize a lot of I'd say, the taboo topics around just being a woman and women's health. I'd say just in general with breastfeeding, I think I wish I had learned that it didn't have to be all or nothing. I think I was working so hard to produce enough milk for my baby that it definitely impacted my mental and emotional health. And I wish I'd been able to kind of take a step back and said, maybe formula is an option for me, maybe donor milk, instead of feeling kind of this spiral of guilt and shame for thinking that something was wrong with my body. And I probably would have ditched the pump earlier because that was definitely labor of love. I did exclusive pumping for 16 months. And I probably would have tried maybe an at-breast supplement or SNS just to be able to retain that nursing relationship, but not feel like I was kind of beholden and attached to the pump at all times as well.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for our next episode. You can find us on Instagram for more updates and tips. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a review if you like us.